Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DeJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you are a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you.
There are a lot of attributes that come into play in becoming a great leader. One of them is being able to inspire everyone in your organization to rally around a common purpose and ignite their passion to execute your vision. In order to do that, you need to be a good presenter. Being a great presenter involves a combination of skills, techniques, and personal attributes. Are you ready to up your presentation skills? Join John DeJulius and Dave Murray for a 2-day workshop and learn the keys to nail your next presentation. They'll cover the 5 elements of a great presentation, how to have more confidence in front of an audience, how to engage with your audience, storytelling, the effective use of visual aids, how to turn your presenting weakness into a strength, and much, much more. For more information, contact Claudia at thedejuliusgroup.com or visit thedejuliusgroup.com for upcoming training and events.
Welcome, revolutionaries, to episode 148 of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. Can you believe it? I made it to 148 without being canceled. Well, a guy can keep trying. I am John DeJulius, Chief Revolution Officer of the DeJulius Group. Today, my guest is Lakshmi Rengarajan, who is a leading researcher on dating and the host of Later Dater Today podcast. Her crossover from working in the dating industry to how and why WeWork hired her to focus on relationships at work. Before we get to our interview, let's talk about employee experience in the news. An article in Fortune titled "Nearly All Bosses Are Accidental with No Former Training." And the research shows it's leading 1 in 3 workers to quit. Shares research conducted by the Chartered Management Institute, which revealed that many of those promoted into managerial positions are all title with no training. These startling findings revealed 1 in 4 employees in the workforce have management responsibility, yet very few have been trained to do their leadership jobs. CMI's research found that an incredible 82% of bosses are accidental managers, and what's even scarier is 25% of those are in senior leadership roles. This is negatively impacting employee morale, and 1/3 of employees are quitting their jobs as a result. Employees who say their manager is ineffective feel seriously less satisfied, valued, and less motivated in their job than those who describe their managers as effective. 50% of employees surveyed who are unhappy with their managers say they are planning to quit within the next 12 months. Employees are not the only ones with low morale. Many of these accidental managers were once high-performing employees prior to being promoted without any leadership training. And according to CMI's research, managers aren't confident in their own leadership abilities, with many struggling when it comes to dealing with the multiple issues facing their team members at work and in their home lives. We will be right back with our interview. If you heard me talk long enough, you've heard me say, what are you consuming? I ask myself that. I ask my leaders that. I ask my employees. I like to say that I am the Joey Chestnuts of consuming my topic. I love to ask my leaders and team members, what are they consuming to become smarter than they were yesterday, to become a better person, to live an extraordinary life so countless others do? Well, I'm going to share with you how you can make consuming content fun and enjoyable for you and your team through Better Book Club. Many agree if you can't grow people, you can't grow your business. I believe one of the best ways to grow your people is through reading. No program on the planet recognizes and rewards reading like Better Book Club. Not at all a traditional book club. Better Book Club is a radically better way to build the habit of reading in your team members. And once the habit of reading is established, anything is possible. Learn more at betterbookclub.com. That's betterbookclub.com. Welcome back, revolutionaries. And let's get to our interview today with Lakshmi Rengarajan, who is a leading researcher on dating and the host of the Later Dater Today podcast, speaker, and her crossover work in the dating industry to How and Why We Work hired her to focus on relationships at work. Welcome, Lakshmi.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. I'm excited. Let's start off with, how did you start on this path to help shaping the dating culture by mapping out the timelines of people who met in person, and make sure I have that right, versus people who meet online?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like you and what you were referring to, like, I think a lot of us sort of had that pit in our stomach, maybe about 10 to 15 years ago, like, wow, some of this stuff that's coming out is really cool. And there's probably going to be some not so great stuff too, and kind of wanting to pay attention to that. So I remember I was working in an ad agency, and, people were dating online, but the dating apps hadn't quite come out. What you could see is that people seemed to have a lot less patience for each other when they were dating.
Online or in person?
Online, right? So they would meet people online and they would sort of make judgments very quickly. And I didn't see anything like necessarily, I didn't think people shouldn't date online. It was more just one of those things where I was like, wow, we're kind of losing that thing that happens when you kind of get to know people over time.
Yeah.
And people wanted to make decisions about whether or not they liked someone in a moment, is what I was starting to see. And so I started designing events and experiences to get people off online dating, and then ended up going to Match because they saw what I was doing and they thought it was really interesting. And then WeWork.
When you said you ended up going, you ended up working at Match.
I ended up working at Match.com. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think, the relationship changes were being very evident. I mean, I think if you talk to anybody, they'll talk about kind of who they were 10 years ago and some of the reflexes and muscles that they had, and how those have slowly changed over time and the effects of the pandemic. And so kind of what I do is I was looking at it very specifically through dating, and then very specifically through the lens of work. So that's sort of the crossover that you alluded to.
Yeah. And I'm more intrigued with it as a customer and employee experience consultant, and as an employer of 3 companies. And we have so many, different generations. It's fun. I heard you say that the side of women, and I don't know, maybe this is women only, but the side of women who shop online is the same one that comes out in online dating. Can you explain that to our listeners?
Yeah. And I definitely wasn't just saying women. I was saying people.
Okay. My bad.
That's okay. No, it's just like, it's an important distinction. Yeah. So, that when we're on these platforms, and I think we can think about any platform that we're on, we are shaped by the user experience. I mean, it's called user experience for a reason, right? Like, we're bringing ourselves, but they're also eliciting a side of ourselves. And I think we know that from any interaction that we have. So it's like, if you think about the screen or the app as like a person, that person impacts how you behave and, what side of you comes out. And so, a lot of how, dating apps are, they're very much designed by like e-commerce principles. And so naturally, the side of you that's going to come out is going to be sort of more of the customer side of you than maybe some of the other sides of you.
Which means what? So like I when I'm scanning through TikTok, I'll see an interview, with a young woman, and a young woman could be 35 or younger, right? And the person saying, what's the and the demographics that she's looking for. What's the, least amount of money you want a man to, make for you to go out with them? She might say 100, 120.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some other things, but height, 6 feet or 6'1" or a taller. And I forget what the third thing might have been. And he said to her, do you know what the percentage, and obviously single, I'm pretty sure that was a requirement.
Yeah.
And he said to her, what do you think the percentage of men out there is? And she said, probably 40. And he said, less than 4. And I don't think people realize. But that got me thinking. So I go to my girlfriend and said, if you were on a dating app and you came across me and I was relatively honest about my height, never, ever been honest with anyone, right? But anyway, I was relatively honest about my height. Would you swipe right on me? And she thought about it and she said, no. I'm like, and see, that's the thing I worry about, especially the younger generation, is when I was in my 20s, which I think is our most formative people skill, social skills and all that. I needed charm and my humor to get someone to give me 10 more seconds or a second chance versus, not having that, So what's your take on all that?
So I think what you're pointing out is very much aligned with what I'm saying. So when you're referring to this video, that person's talking to a woman about their idealized state.
Right.
Right. And you could have asked the same question to a man and you would have probably gotten
Right.
Right. And I think that's important. Like everyone's kind of coming in with, this idealized version. And what I know from studying relationships for so long is people actually aren't as stringent about those things as you might assume.
When you meet in person, I assume?
When you meet in person or when you meet over time or most importantly, when you meet in context.
Right.
Right. So context.
But if you just have the option to swipe right or swipe left, you're going to do it kind of, I think what you were referring to is materialistically, right?
I think you're going not necessarily materialistically, but you're going over a very, very tiny sliver of information.
Yeah.
Right. That's sort of like the point. And different, one day you could be superficial in one way and one way you could be superficial in another way. I think what I'm sort of trying to bring to light is people are making decisions about who someone is in a split second. And that is how it is designed.
Right.
And all I'm saying is that is part of who you are. It's just not all of who you are.
Right.
And we don't have as many places that are cultivating the other sides of you and the other sides of other people is what I'm trying to say.
And so is that what the concept of later dater is for?
I think what the later dater today is about is, so I have like a theory and maybe I would love to hear what you think about it. So I work with people, I'm focusing on people 45 to 59. Mm-hmm. And that to me is a very, very
I'm 59. I only have a couple more months, but
okay. Give or take a few years in either direction. But the reason why I wanted to focus on that group is I'm part of that group. And this was the generation, it's, squarely Gen X. It was the generation that was formed as much by technology as it was by analog experiences. Right. So a lot of the internal wiring, if you talk to anyone in Gen X, they have very, very distinct memories of being bored. They have very distinct memories of not having anything to do, of going to a party and not having a phone and having to sit in awkward conversation. Right. There is that muscle was developed very strongly.
I miss those times because I'd strike up a conversation with a total stranger, man or woman, and find out so much versus just sitting on my phone, doing whatever we do on our phone.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think like what I'm trying to do on the podcast is sort of remind people that, hey, actually, these are some attributes you have that you may not be appreciating as much right now. And, you were asking me before we started recording about Gen Z, and actually Gen Z, like nobody wants to be told that they missed out on something. Nobody wants to hear that. Yeah. However, Gen Z, in my experience, is actually quite interested in the muscles that some of these previous generations developed. And so that's why I actually do have a lot of Gen Z people who listen to my podcast which I was surprised to hear.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad that makes me feel good. about that they're learning or wanting to explore? Because I call them relationship disadvantaged and no fault of their own, right? They were
Yeah,
grown.
absolutely. No fault of their own. But what makes me very optimistic, and I think this will make you optimistic, is how many of them are like, no, we want to learn these things. We want to understand maybe some of what we missed out on. And they're looking, for, I think it's the different. And what I never do is I'm never out to lecture anybody. I'm more just trying to remind people of what things used to be like and some of the really great sort of interaction muscles that were built, and how important they are, and how we really don't want to get rid of them entirely.
Well, the other thing that I'm concerned with, again, with an agenda as an employer, is, there's a sliver of Gen Z, but with a 4-year window that got it even worse than everyone else because they had to go to college, let's say, in the pandemic. And that was, as we all remember, was such a vital part of our relationship building formative years. And then there a percentage of them are taking jobs from work from home. And then, just saying with a buddy, hey, you want to go grab a drink? Hey, you want to go, I don't know, go play pickleball and all those things, and reducing those people. So I get really worried about them. I have 3 boys. They're between 21 and 31, and they're really good socially. And they all have significant others today. So I'm not as worried, but if they didn't, I'd be really, really worried. And that could change. But I don't know. What's your take on that? Should I be as worried about that part of Gen Zs who didn't necessarily go to school in person and maybe are taking work from home jobs?
Yeah. I mean, I think we should be worried about them, but I think it's important that we don't sort of send a signal that you're broken or you got messed up. I think that's where we have to be careful. I think that they did miss out on something, but I think we should try and figure out well, what did they gain in the process? There's, as we know, anytime there's, a crisis or something bad that's happened in society, there another muscle has been developed that we may not have appreciated. So I'm always trying to figure out if they didn't have the muscles that I have, what did they develop? And then what can I learn from them and what can they learn from me? Right. So I think that is the way that we should approach it. Not they've all experienced some awful deficit. I think anytime we think in those terms, it doesn't really help anyone. And, you were saying I love that you said your boys are in a relationship now. I love that you said that because I feel like people forget that you can be in a relationship and that is no guarantee that you will
be
always
be for 25 years. Right. And
and
that's your audience. That's your audience.
Yeah. And, no one that I work with ever thought that they would be this age and be looking
single
for
at 50. Yeah.
And so I think there's this idea that dating is a young person's domain, and it's absolutely not true. It's everybody's domain. And so it is so important. That's why I study dating culture, not just one aspect of it. It's something that everyone is going to probably dip into at some point.
Right.
And I just think it's probably one of the most important things and one of the most overlooked things, which is why I care about it so much. And so I think why I zeroed in on 45 to 59 is I realized that, so dating culture, typically, if you ever look at what happened in dating, it's always defined by people in their 20s or 30s. Whatever they're doing is what everybody kind of has to do. And so part of my thesis is maybe for this one, we should let maybe the older folks, kind of have more
autonomy.
But have more sort of influence on how dating culture,
for them or just in general?
In general.
Is dating culture different for generations?
Yes, because the technology is so different.
Yeah, well, they could all use the same technology, right? But some are resistant than others, or some grew up on it. While, I'm sure in your world, like mine, you could meet a 50-year-old who is, still on rotary dial versus very, savvy on technology, right? So you probably get people all over the board with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So with the if someone's only online and, they're not getting the swipes, how does that affect someone's self-esteem? That's got to weigh on them, no?
Yes. I mean, I definitely think if people are not, kind of connecting, but it's not the only form of disappointment, right? It's probably the easiest one to point out, but there's a lot of different kinds like, even if you do, have a lot of matches, that doesn't mean those matches go anywhere.
Yeah.
You could go out on a date and, someone can be very different from how they presented themselves online, or, there's all sorts of, I think that's the probably the most obvious form of disappointment, or,
right.
Like unmet expectation, but there's a whole buffet of unmet expectations.
But this is where you come in later. Correct me if I'm wrong. Later Dater Today podcast, and I think what you're doing educates people on different ways of connecting.
Yes.
I mean, don't you have events too?
No, I used to do events. Yeah, I used to do events. I'm
so
thinking about bringing them back, but that's to be TBD.
For our listeners who are dating, what are some suggestions you give them, obviously, besides using online dating? First, sign up for the Later Dater Today podcast and follow that.
Just listen to it. And also listen to it in order. So it's sort of sequenced very carefully. So we kind of start with fundamental principles and then go to, a lot of listener questions, or, really, really thinking about, rewiring yourself, I would say, is the most important thing you can do right now. I think a lot of people just sort of ingested the dating apps. And again, I'm not against the dating apps. People think that I'm against them. I'm not against them. I just think they can overtake you.
You got to supplement them, right?
Yeah. And also, I think use them with care and with thought. And I think that's sort of what I'm trying to do in the podcast. Before you even open the thing, before you do anything, there are certain things you have to emotionally and psychologically have in place to take advantage of it without being, sort of overwhelmed by it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. So tell us about your crossover work in the dating industry and why WeWork hired you to focus on relationships in the professional lives.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was working in dating, and I think the thing that I was noticing is, people sort of had who they were on their profile and then who they were in person. And sometimes there's, a bit of a dissonance. You kind of have to cross that bridge. And so in many ways, the same thing was happening in dating. I mean, the same thing was happening at work, right? There's who somebody is online, there's who somebody is on Zoom, and then there's who somebody is in a physical sense. And so we were all getting more and more splintered. And so for them, it was very easy to see that what I was doing in the dating world had actually a lot of application in the workplace. And so
how so? So now getting into, really my, bandwidth of making sure leaders build strong relationships with their employees, right? From a professional standpoint. Employees work together well and collaborate. And then ultimately, we have strong people skills to build rapport with our customers, show empathy, show compassion. I'm assuming it's all the same. Am I correct?
Yeah, it is very much the same. I think the thing that's a little bit harder in dating is there is a very, very heavy sort of veil of judgment, because you kind of have to make a decision about someone.
Yeah.
So I think that in some ways that is what makes it a little bit harder, because people, when you come to work, of course, you're making judgments about people, but you also know you're probably going to have to work with them on a project. You're probably going to see them in a meeting. You are going to fill out someone's performance review. So you kind of have to press pause on a lot of your assumptions and judgments.
Yeah, dating, I guess I don't have to tolerate the person because I can move on versus...
Right. Well, and you're there with a different objective, right? So while it makes sense, it's just again, I'm just drawing people's attention to the fact that the goal of it is to have an assessment of somebody, within 1 to 3 interactions.
Yeah.
And we don't make that same demand in other places of our lives, right? We usually have a more extended timeline. So So there are similarities, but there are also places where it kind of diverges.
Does this come up? So I teach people about building an instant rapport with others. And this could be, out at a bar at a country club. And again, it's not about mine isn't about dating, but it's just about how to build an instant rapport because it's a lost art, any generation. And I say the first obstacle, if me and you were at a conference or ate lunch in the cafeteria of work, and we spoke for 15 minutes. That doesn't mean I built a rapport with you because I could have talked to you about myself for the entire 15 minutes, right? And I say this, we're all genetically pre-coded to be consumed with what's going on in our life. And that's a harder urge to resist, is to throw up on you about, oh my God, my flight was delayed last night. My son got in trouble at school and this client is driving me crazy. So we teach that about, rapport building, of focusing on the other person. What can you learn from the other person? And my technique is you got to learn two or more things of their Ford, F-O-R-D, right? Family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. And if you can kind of organically bring that up, now I'm talking less about me. Usually those are people's hot buttons, one or all of those things. So, what do you think? Am I on the right track? And does that go back and forth to both dating and just inherent people skills?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that all adds up, and I think the thing in a dating context is there is an exchange of information, but I think what people are really trying to understand is the other person's values, because it's dating. Right. And you're trying to see if that matches up.
Yeah.
So it's like you're going to start and then, you're kind of trying to see if you're going to match in that regard. And so that's where something that wouldn't bother you in a friendship or building business context can bother you very much when you're in a dating context, because you see it as a value, not an idiosyncrasy, not like something else. So that's where it's a little bit different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you enjoy what you're learning on the Customer Service Revolution podcast, you'll love our weekly newsletter, The E-Service. It's full of great customer experience tips and stories, includes special offers, webinars, and more each week. To sign up, head to tdg.click/e-service. That's tdg.click, click/e-service, ESERVICE. Enter your preferred email address, and you can look forward to great advice from John in your inbox every Wednesday.
So I've given this advice to my 3 boys over the years, and tell me if it's good or bad advice.
Okay.
So I said, when you go out, you meet someone, potential, someone you might want to date. I say for them, right? The family, occupation, recreation, just ask them questions about them. And I say, but after 20, 30 minutes, if someone came up to them and said, tell me what you know about my son, and they couldn't say anything, then that might be a red flag that they love talking about themselves, but they never turned it back on my son to learn about him. So I don't know, was that good advice to say that?
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's actually quite sound. Okay. I think it's just my only just because I've talked to people, it's just sometimes, on a date, nerves get in the way and people are in a restaurant.
Yeah.
So just, if you can give a little bit of grace around that,
Yeah. And this wasn't even like a date. I meant if you just meet someone at, a bar, let's say, focus on them. But if they never ask you anything about you, they might not be Mrs. Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And, just like with anything else, I think people are looking for just someone who's genuine and being authentic. And sometimes, sometimes people can ask you questions, but it feels like a little robotic, they've technically checked the box.
Right.
But it's did you really want to know about me? Or did you just feel like you have to check, your sales sheet, to make sure you asked me about? So I think I think sometimes that's really important too. Like I know a lot of people who can check the box in a conversation, but actually haven't built any rapport
or remember it. They weren't listening.
I'm sure you know that too. Yeah.
Yeah. How can a lot of connection employee programming fail to not only help people connect, but even create the seeds of disconnection?
Did I write that somewhere? That seems like something I would say.
Yeah. I heard you say it.
Okay.
in one of your speeches. Yeah. Did I get it right?
I was like, wow, that is bizarrely accurate. That's like
all right, good.
My words.
I hope I got it right. I told you I watched your demos and a lot of videos, and I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
And you're also a storytelling, story setter expert as well.
Yeah. All different dimensions of this.
Yeah.
So I think a good example of that is, and I know this is sort of like a hot take, but I think sometimes when people bring people together, it's more about the organizer than it is about the people. If that makes sense. So it's like people like really want to have people together and they want to get the Instagram shot or something, but they haven't really thought about, are people actually like, did you design this for people or did you design this for you?
Yeah.
Right. So an example can be like a company town hall. There are wonderful company town halls, right?
Yeah.
And then there are ones that look really good and people are miserable at them. And they feel like nobody heard, like they didn't answer any of the employee questions. They didn't ask it was just, like a moment for a leader
versus a quality team building opportunity, correct?
Right. So the distinction that I'm trying to make there is like, I've heard so many people like again, not a popular opinion, but those fancy like dinners at retreats and stuff like that,
yeah.
conferences.
Yeah.
Like I know people experience incredible disconnection at those things.
Right.
But they don't feel like saying anything, or they don't, because it's like they just got a meal and it looks so nice.
Well, it also might be an awards night where you're only recognizing 5% of the audience. So 95% are either disappointed, embarrassed, let down. And so have you ever heard the expression, I'm going off what you're saying, a Disney dad?
A Disney dad. Same.
So a Disney dad is I'm sure there's Disney moms, but a Disney dad is known as, let's say they're divorced and the mom, and I don't want to, upset anyone, but in some cases, right, the mom is the one taking care of them, make sure they get their homework done and practice and ordering uniforms.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
But now it's dad's weekend, maybe once a month.
Yeah.
Sweeps in and takes him to Disney. And dad's the greatest guy in the world, but he wasn't doing, and mom has to be, did you do your homework? You can't leave unless you get your homework. And dad doesn't worry about that. Well, I refer to that as a Disney boss, what you were just saying. And I've been guilty of this where, I do, maybe I didn't do enough in the year, and show appreciation, but I took my employees to this 5-diamond resorts, pound my chest of what a great boss I am. But to your point, it wasn't, they didn't get as much out of it as I think they did. And, it's the little things throughout the year that would be even better than spending the, 6 figures on that awards dinner or whatever it was.
Right. Exactly. And I think it's like all in how it's done. I mean, those things can be really awesome. And they can also be incredibly disconnected for people because it wasn't really about them. Like someone had to, leave their family for 3 or 4 days. And, they're talking to, just the people next to them.
Right.
And it's hard because those things feel like you've checked the boxes. When we had a leadership offsite, we took everybody to Tahoe or something like that, and I just I don't know that they always do what they're supposed to do. And there's the pictures of it and then there's the experience of it.
Right. Yeah. So I know what your sweet spot is, right? Later dating today and helping people from 40 to 59,
45 to 59,
45 to 59, but try to put it on, and I don't think it's too much of a stretch for you because that's what you're hired to do, like by WeWork. For leaders who want to develop their people to have better people skills, right? What advice would you give them that you've learned from your research and all that?
Yeah. I think I would start by doing an audit of their people skills.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. They have to model the behavior.
Yeah. And truly value it. Like, it's interesting. I think people are talking about like, oh, people skills are so important. And it's so important for people to have them. But at the end of the day, there's not always an incentive for them. People are not compensated for that. They are not necessarily appreciated for it. So it's sort of like, you always have to look at the incentive structures. Yeah. Right. At the end of the day, you can say people skills are important, but what is it that you're rewarding in your organization? So I would say that would be like the first thing, Is there one common thing that, what you find in your people when you're bringing them in-person events or encouraging them to do more in-person events to supplement the online? Is there one common flaw or weakness you find that that you're going to have to coach them up, if you will? Because whatever that is probably the same thing in the corporate world. Leaders and employees we need to look for or address. Do you have anything in common? Yeah, I guess from an event perspective, like I would probably do kind of what I was doing before is I want to understand the origin of why they thought this was the right idea.
Okay.
Right. So whatever it is, the fancy
from the
retreat,
event planner or for the attendees?
For the people who are planning it, which is usually leadership, they've made a decision like we're going to do a happy hour. We're going to do this. And I'm not even saying that that's wrong. Sometimes that can be exactly the solution. I just want to understand why. Like,
what
why
about the attendees? If you had an event tonight, obviously they all have strengths and weaknesses. But if there was one that was most common, that you did it right as an event planner and you brought people together, and in your case, it could be for dating. What is the one thing you could say that if people struggle with connecting with someone else, it would be in this? Not all, but is there one that's more common than another that if you were coaching someone, you would tell them, or you would work with them on this?
There's a couple things. I think the thing, and it's changed over time. I think the thing that I would say right now, and it's kind of philosophical, is people are going to events right now, I think, and mostly like tolerating them, like, okay, I got to be here. I got to I think someone's physical presence is like one of the most amazing, beautiful things that can happen.
So correct me. My body language, right, could be acting like I don't want to be here.
I'm not even getting to that. No. I'm just saying that there is something in 2024. If you are in a shared space with other humans, they have given up their time. They have made it there. You are there. Do not underestimate the importance and significance of that. Does that make sense?
Go a little deeper. So I'm going to an event tonight, let's say, whether I have to, I want to. A lot of times, I like you, I speak. And the organization will ask me to come to the cocktail reception the night before. I hope none of my clients are listening right now, but that's the last thing I want to do, right? I fly, I get in, I just, kind of want to, do some work and go to bed. But I go. So what would you be advising me, John? Just be careful, be cognizant of not, or, along the lines of what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm getting like existential here. Like we are getting further and further from each other, right? Like we just are, like the fibers of society.
So what's your number one advice to me if I'm going to, that event that I really don't want to go to make the most of it? What would you say, John? Make sure you pay attention to your, I don't know.
I would still say what I'm saying. I wouldn't change it at all. I'm not sure.
I don't think I'm just trying to get more of an actionable thing that I'm aware of when I step into this event.
But it is action oriented because I'm asking you to reflect. I'm asking you to reflect on what's happening in society and that people don't gather as much anymore. And maybe you're going to things all the time, but not everybody else is. And you could be.
So look at it as an opportunity, right?
Yeah, you can look at it as an opportunity, what I'm trying to say is like that you could be one of only 4 people that person interacts with now.
Right.
The number of interactions that people are having are declining over, declining over time. So instead of being like, I have to be at this thing, being like, you may be 10% of the human interactions that person might have in a month. Like, your presence is significant, is what I'm trying to say.
In person, it might be more than that, right?
Yes, that's the point that I'm trying to make. Like, if you had asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have been like, ask this question, look like this, play, do like that.
Yeah.
I'm taking a step back is what I'm saying. And like genuinely appreciating humanity and appreciating the people that choose to be in the same space with you.
Yeah. And don't take it for granted. I'm assuming, here's what I'm hearing is, for me, don't go to it about what's in it for me. Like you said, I might meet someone at the, I don't know, shrimp bar or whatever you want to call it. And, I strike up a conversation, and she needs to have a good conversation, or he needs to have a good conversation. And I like to think everyone has a story if we, look for it. And
everyone. And also just, I think, like, I don't know what things are like where you live, but where I live, like, a lot of people, their social calendars do not look anything like they used to. Right? It's not the same.
In what way?
They're not going out as much.
Yeah, right. Oh my God.
Right?
Oh my God. Like
that's the point I'm trying to make.
I used to have a dry cleaning service that picked up and dropped off twice a week pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
I, don't wear clothes because I, unless I'm on a plane flying to a speech, I don't, I'm not wearing the clothes. So because I'm not going out socially like it was back in the day.
Right. So I get excited, when I go to get coffee, like the barista, the whole team there knows me, and we don't even have a long conversation, but they know. And if I'm not there for 2 days, they will say something,
I love that.
And I talk to my
neighbor. They know your order, right?
Yeah. I order on the app, but yes, they know my order.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But like, my neighbors, like we always like make sure if one of us is going out of town that we, give whatever we have in the refrigerator to the other person. Right. It's just like, what I'm trying to say is I'm treating every human interaction as sacred right now. I think that's where we are right now.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Lakshmi, how can people learn more, get more about you?
Yeah. I'm at a lot of different ways. I'm at the Later Dater Today website, Instagram, all the things. I'm on LinkedIn, and
I will have all these links in the show notes. So laterdatertoday.com, also your website.com, because if people are looking for speakers, you're a fantastic speaker. And then the link to the Later Dater Today podcast and how to follow you on social media.
Yes.
Anything I missed that you think my audience needs to hear?
Well, it's funny. I was listening to a few episodes, and I was reading about you as well. And I was thinking about, so I used to be a customer service operator for a gift card company. I did that for like 2 years.
Like when you say operator, over the phone?
Like customer service. Yeah. Like headset, the whole, like sitting in a basement,
That's a tough job.
And I was thinking about, and I know you're talking about customer experience in a very, like large way.
No, but we cover call centers, support centers, contact centers, the whole gamut. Even I'm hoping it was a Starbucks that you were talking about. They're a client of ours. So if it was,
no,
great.
it's a local coffee shop in New York. But what I think about a lot, and what I try to tell people about dating, and I think this will cover a lot of the different things that you asked in our conversation. Like when you're talking, let's say you're talking to a customer service rep, like for your cable company or your phone or whatever. And I remember I used to be on the other end of this. And you know how it's so easy to cross wires? It can be so easy. Like one turn of phrase, because you feel like this person owes you something. And it's just so easy for that conversation to go haywire, right?
Yeah.
And that's what happened in dating, right? It's like two people are meeting, and it's as if they might as well both be wearing headsets in like different parts. And the tiniest thing goes wrong, and it can go haywire so quick.
Do people look for something to go wrong? Are we more wired today to, be looking for red flags?
That's what I was saying about sort of the consumer mindset that people don't realize that they put on, right? So like they go on a date, and all of a sudden they forget that it's a human who has their whole life, and it's very easy. It's not even anyone's fault. It's very easy to start to treat it like the person on the other end when you call Verizon who owes you something.
Right.
Who has to win your trust. And you're sort of assuming that if they do something wrong or if they make a mistake, that they somehow are not a good person. And that's usually not the case at all. People are just very flawed and are trying to do the best they can. And so
that's the opposite to that, or the flip to that, what we try to teach, and it all comes back to, I think this applies to both what we're talking about, business and personal dating, is we try to teach a day in the life of a customer. Like, you have no idea what, that customer, and you have no idea what the person you may be going out with is going
through. Exactly the same thing.
And I've been guilty of being that customer, talking to a customer service rep or a cashier, not loving their answer or hiding behind policy, right? Not a horrible thing, but just I'm annoyed. But I ripped into them.
Yeah.
And then after, I'm doing the download saying, why was I so, hard on them? Right? I mean, it didn't warrant. But then I realized it's not so much what they did or said or didn't do. It's what's been going on in my life the past week or month. And I just kind of took it out on them. That was the straw that broke the camel back. So we try to teach customer service reps to not take it personally. But that I'm assuming that could bleed over to any walk of life. Having a first date and you have no idea what this person could be going through. Her mother could be sick. Right. Her mother could have dementia, right? Especially at your age range of people, our parents, are at so many things. And we could have a knee-jerk reaction to that this person's a bitch or, arrogant or all those things. I don't know. Am I right on the parallels?
I mean, and I think it doesn't even have to be something like disastrous that's going on for them. It's just that
stress.
People make different things mean something, right? So like on a date, who pays or how they order can, take on a significance that is actually not that important, but you're always like trying to figure out what it means.
Yeah. All right, Lakshmi, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed this. I learned a lot. I mean, I do think a lot of it applies just to overall people skills, in any walk of life. So we just finished with Lakshmi Rengarajan, who is a leading researcher on dating and the host of the Later Dater Today podcast, speaker. And we'll have all her links for you to follow and register and follow her on social media and be on the Later Dater Today podcast. Should I worry if Later Dater Today podcast is on my girlfriend's phone?
It wouldn't be on her phone, would it? It's on an app. It's just a podcast.
But I'm saying, should I be worried if she follows that? Does that mean she's
no? Because
it's
also just about human skills, as we sort of talked about. It is geared towards daters, but it's all about just how to interact and keep your interaction muscles strong in today's world. Not just about dating.
Okay, good answer. All right, thank you so much, and thank you, Revolutionaries, for this week's episode. We'll be right back. Let's wrap up this episode with my mantra, living an extraordinary life so countless others do. The words we choose to use influence our attitudes. What we talk about, we bring about. So often we use the phrase have to versus get to for our commitments, tasks for any given day. When someone asks us if we can do something next Friday, we might respond with, I have to work that day. Think about it. Many of us have a great job, one that many others would kill to have. By instead saying, I have to, we can say, I get to work that day, which is reminding ourselves how fortunate we are. Many people don't like the job they have or may be out of work right now. Or I've been even guilty of saying, I have to go to my son's wrestling tournament this weekend. No, I get to. Watching any of my three boys in their activities growing up was one of and is the most rewarding things I have ever done in my life. I only have one left in college. The rest have gone on and graduated, and the window is closing for the chance for me to watch my youngest son, Bo, wrestle. I get to reminds me that this is a gift and not a chore. The get to philosophy reflects a profound shift in attitude and perspective away from it being a task or obligation towards realizing it is an opportunity and privilege. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode on the Customer Service Revolution podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give the Customer Service Revolution podcast a thumbs up and write us a review. To hear more episodes, subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening and for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.